Right, so we have successfully created a table from an entity object that we declared in Java. But if you notice it chose as the name of the table, it chose the name of the class, which is not a bad choice. But usually, uh, uh, the convention is that classes are meant as a schema, right? That declares how the various instances are going to be instantiated, correct? And typically, the naming convention in Java is that classes are nouns and they're singular, right? You say you have it's a course, it's a module, and then you instantiate many modules and many courses, yes, right? But the naming convention typically in SQL is that the tables are plural, are nouns but plural, right? So notice that we're breaking the naming convention on the on the um, on the SQL side, right? Thankfully, JPA is not trying to be smart here and try to pluralize this for me, okay? As Mongo does. We'll see Mongo later on when we come back from the break. Mongo will attempt to pluralize the tables, right? So that if I have it singular in my code, it'll try to pluralize it for me, which is annoying because not all words are pluralized the same, right? So anyway, so we can override some of these opinions, right, and guide the some of the choices that JPA did by overriding them. So for instance, we can now override the default naming convention for the table. We can say, instead of using the table name, what you chose, instead I'm going to annotate. There's a table annotation that allows me to override the name of the table. I can say that the name that I really want to use, I don't want to use the name that you chose. Instead, I want to choose modules, plural. Make sense? And if we rerun that, right, what it'll do is that it'll create recreate the table. Okay, notice that indeed it chose modules instead. Right, if we refresh, there is modules. Notice that it's not smart enough to remove anything older, right? That it's not like it renames old tables, right? Although you can configure it that instead of just create, you can specifically tell it drop and create, meaning just start from zero, throw everything away, right, and recreate from scratch. I mean, that's even more dangerous, right? Already create is very dangerous, right? Because you could be changing things that you might not want to change. All right, so other things that we can override is that the ID here is it is my responsibility to make sure that whatever I insert, that primary key is unique, right? Instead, I can delegate that to the database, right? We saw when we were looking at SQL, we saw that if you're doing SQL Server, you can declare a field as an identity, right? And then you're delegating the server, the database, to calculate the next unique identifier for your primary key, right? In MySQL, you can do the same thing. You can use auto increment, right? You can have it automatically choose the next identifier. In Oracle, we said that we could use sequences, right? There it is, right? There's three different ways of achieving the same thing, and JPA needs to be able to handle all different strategies, right? So you have to be able to say, well, not only you have to tell me which vendor I'm talking to, right? You need to tell me, what dialect I'm talking about, Oracle, which version of Oracle am I talking, right? But also I need to specify what strategy do I want to use to implement certain things, right? So that's one of the things that can be configured. You need to tell me what to do. By default, it leaves it up to the Java world to choose your unique identifier, but we can delegate that to the database server instead. So back on Java, we can annotate. We can add additional annotations to a field, right? By saying that this is a generated value, meaning I am not going to provide this value, right? This value you're going to generate for me, database, right? I don't want to handle it at the application level. I want to handle it at the database level, right? But then you have to specify, well, how am I going to generate? What's the strategy that I'm going to generate, right? So you can configure what the strategy is, and there's several strategies, right? Again, depending on your particular vendor, you'll be using different strategies, right? SQL Server uses identity. MySQL calls it auto increment. Oracle calls it a sequence, right? You can specify what you want to use. For both SQL Server and MySQL, we're going to use identity. Identity handles both auto increments and identity, depending on which vendor you're using, right? For MySQL, it'll use auto increment. So let's do that. Let's configure that. So if we do that and we refresh and we rerun our server, it'll recreate the table. But this time around, hopefully, it'll add auto increment. Notice that they added auto increment at the end, right, of the ID, right? So now we've successfully delegated all this to the database. Make sense? All right.